It only seemed right after my extensive testing of Super Nakeds this year. The last 6 weeks I've tried all the Super Nakeds bar the new H2SX SE, which I'm testing next week. But I've tried all the others, and it only seems right that I test again what was my bike of 2020. My ultimate Super Naked, my ultimate bike of 2020 last year, the KTM 1290 Superduke. I've tested the Street Fighter, I've tested the new Speed Triple RS on the road and on the track, I've tested the Dragster, the MV Dragster, the new Street Fighter. It only seems right we go back to the Superduke, and I let you know how this bike compares to all those other Super Nakeds, and if this still is the daddy. Chopsy, roll the intro. Is she still the daddy? It's like getting aboard an old friend. It's like riding an old friend. Oh yes. So, a quick recap of the stats of this machine, because it's been a year or so since I've reviewed one of these. About 180 horsepower, give or take. 140 newton meters of torque. A massive revision for last year, this bike, with the new frame, the new suspension, you know, updated sort of pivot points for the swinging arm, additional linkages in the rear, a smaller fuel tank but bigger airbox with new top feed injectors. I mean, KTM went through this entire bike and completely overhauled it last year, and when I first rode this I was blown away with how much better it was than the Gen 2 version. It is head and shoulders above the Gen 2 version, this bike. Those who say, well, no, the Gen 2's better, it's not, guys. Wake up and smell the coffee. This thing is a far superior package to the Gen 1, Gen 2 bikes. The Gen 2 bikes are fantastic, but this just completed that package. The engine was always the showstopper with the Gen 2 bike. It was all about that engine, but the chassis never quite lived up to the engine's potential. KTM sorted that. The chassis is as good as the engine now, and it makes such a complete package. But not only that, not only have they made the chassis great, made it handle and everything, but it's just the engine response. It's an absolute pussycat lower down the rev range now. There's none of that shuddering, there's none of that transition of weight back and forth. It was tiring to ride the old bike. This one is just beautiful. But things have moved on. There's some new competition now. There's an all-new Tuono for 2021, which is amazing. The Street Fighter's been overhauled. It's got more torque lower down the rev range, and they've made it a little bit easier to ride. So where does the Superduke sit now? And of course, let's not forget the brand new Speed RS, which is incredible. How do those bikes compare to this one? Well, unfortunately, I can't do a comparison with Greg between this and the Tuono, because he's in Greece at the moment on holiday, and I haven't got the Tuono while I've got this. It's just the timing's worked out bad, unfortunately, because we both would have really liked to have pitched this up against the Tuono, because these two really what? The Superduke and the Tuono really are sort of classed as the two daddies of the Super Naked, really. The other ones are all good, but I think it's those two which people think of when you think of the ultimate Super Naked. Oh, but the Tuono's not a Super Naked, just because it's got fairing. Oh, behave. What really impresses me with the Superduke, and it did last year, it still does now when I jumped on it, it's just how easy it is to ride. Bikes like the Street Fighter were just hard work to ride. I know in our comparison I said I'd take the Street Fighter over the Tuono. Well, when I rode the Street Fighter back to Ducati, I changed my mind. It's just such hard work, and I only got 80 miles out of a tank on it, and sort of on the motorway, not even really riding it that hard. 80 miles to a tank, it's just not practical. There's so much engine braking, it's just really tiring to ride, and it's almost a bit too loud. Even the sound of it was too loud, it was getting on my nerves by the time I arrived back at Ducati, and I was all too happy to hand it over and ride away on this. And as soon as I got on this, it was just chalk and cheese. So easy to ride, the perfect amount of engine braking without throwing you forward every time. And yes, I did adjust the engine braking on the electronics on the Street Fighter. I minimised it as much as you can on the electronics, and it's still too much. This is just a beautiful bike to ride. The suspension, I'd say, is for the road, it's absolutely perfect. It's not as taut, it's not as sharp, it doesn't handle as well as the Street RS. I think the Street RS is the most focused of the Super Nakeds now. It's the quickest for a set of twisties. The Speed Triple RS, it's the quickest through a set of twisties out of all the Super Nakeds, which is quite amazing. It is fast, that bike. The brakes are incredible, you know. It's just, I think it's the scalpel, to term a KTM phrase, of the Super Nakeds now, that Speed RS. But it's not perfect, you know. It is a little stiff, the suspension, when you want to just ride slow. I mean, I dialed out a lot of it. It was nowhere near as bad as what all the reviews said, but it is a little bit taut still. So when you're not looking to go bananas, it is a little bit taut. This is a little bit softer, it's a little bit more forgiving. The front, you know, this doesn't handle as well. The front end doesn't give as much feedback as the Speed. The Speed front end was the best front end in the business, absolutely. But this is just a slightly nicer bike to ride, I think, on the road. Also, the electronics on the Speed, Triumph completely cocked that up. Completely cocked up the electronics, meaning, you know, so you can't separate anti-wheelie and traction control. Completely cocked that up for a Super Naked. That is no good at all. That put me right off that bike. And also, to actually turn off the traction control, you've got to go all through the menus, and then it comes back on again once you reset the ignition. No, that's something from a decade ago. That isn't the latest electronics. On this, put it into the performance mode, and then I run this all the time with wheelie control off but traction on, and you've even got little buttons here to take the traction up and down, copied from the Tuono. That's the same system, and it's really, really good. On this, these also double up as your plus and minus for your cruise control though, which is really handy. So plus and minus speed for your cruise control, something they're not done on the Tuono. Missed a trick there. So this bike is incredibly practical. The latest electronics, which work fantastically well, a brilliant engine response, just a very, very nice, easy to ride motor. You know, you don't need to do anything to this bike. Now, I said this last year, you don't think, well, I got it remapped and it'll improve the throttle response. It is absolutely perfect. It's not snatchy, it's very, very instant. I mean, instant. The throttle feels instant on this. There's no ride-by-wire lag on this bike. It feels like a one-to-one throttle. So that's the only thing about it. You've got to be very gentle with your throttle inputs. You know, it's not even the dragster was a little bit snatchy. It was very aggressive on the throttle. This isn't. You can just poodle this. You no need to change any of the modes. I just leave it in sport the whole time. There's no need to adjust the throttle maps. This is when you know a bike is perfect, when you don't have to then go in and swap between sport, road. You don't want to keep doing that. What's the fun in that? You just want it set up perfectly from the factory, and that is what this bike is. But it's a lively throttle. You've got to be, you can almost whiskey throttle this bike if you're not very precise with it. So that is probably my only criticism with this bike, and it's not really a criticism, but just watch the throttle, and you have to be precise with it. If you're a bit forgetful or you're tired, then that could be a reason to change out the sport mode and go for a softer throttle, because especially if you're running the wheelie control off everywhere, you could actually whiskey throttle this bike and flip it if you're just a little bit tired and you gave a bit of an incorrect throttle response. That's how much grunt it's got. When you go on the power feels like 60% of the power is there instantly. As soon as you turn the throttle, you've got 60% of the available torque instantly. That's what it feels like. It's just so much grunt. It's a wall of grunt. It's way gruntier than any of the other Super Nakeds. Way gruntier. The Tuono in the mid-range then becomes stronger than this, so that you get 60% of your grunt instantly, and then that fades down from that point on, whereas the Tuono will give you 30% of your torque instantly, and then when you get in the mid-range you'll get 80% of your torque. So the Tuono wakes up more in the mid-range than this does, but this just has power instantly, and that is a brilliant characteristic of this engine. There's no need to go up and down, bang it down, overtake. It's just any gear, instant power. But with great power becomes great responsibility, as Spider-Man once said. This thing is a wheelie monster, and what is great about it, and this is something the Speed RS was good as well. On out of the road, you lot. Come on, out the road. Bloody hell. The Speed RS was the same, you know, with the electronics on, it does still let you have a bit of fun getting the wheel up. And that's whole fun. That's the whole point of a Super Naked, isn't it? It's about fun. And the Speed RS also let you wheelie with electronics on, so that was good. The Street Fighter, the Tuono, they don't let you wheelie very much with electronics on, so that's a bit of a criticism of those bikes. You can turn the wheelie control off and then you can wheelie them, but just bear that in mind. If you're not, you know, if you're not skilled enough to, or feel comfortable enough to turn the electronics off but still want the wheel coming up and have a bit of fun, then the Superduke, the Speed RS are the ones for you if you want to sample a bit of wheelie action without the risk of getting thrown off the back. Those are the bikes. Sounds great too. I love that V-twin growl. It's a real growl on this bike. A snarl. It's a snarl, not a growl, a snarl. Quick shifter and blipper is also one of the best. Very, very good. Even at low speed, high speed, it's an incredibly good quick shifter blipper system on this. Front brake stylemas are fantastic, much better than the Gen 2 braking setup. Not quite as sharp as the Speed RS, but still very, very good, and lots of feel from the brakes as well. Lovely brake setup. Doesn't unbalance the bike as you go on and off the brakes, you know. You can ride this like a sports bike, whereby you're using the front brake to do most of your braking with, without transitioning too much weight around. It's a weapon, this, you know. Absolute weapon. So there she is, the Superduke 3 in all her glory, and in my favourite colour. I do love these Red Bull inspired colours with the orange and the blue, the matte blue. I'm not so sure I'd like the matte, because this morning when I filled it out with petrol, I spilled a little bit of petrol on the tank, and I have to clean that off somehow. But matte paint, not a massive fan, but I do love the orange, and the Red Bull blue is very nice. The new frame, 3 times more rigid than the old frame. You know, that frame rigidity has made a massive difference to how the bike handles now. One thing I really like with the KTMs is all the engines are painted. So I don't know if it's a powder coat finish or whatever it is, but the whole engine is painted. There's no bare aluminium anywhere to, you know, to corrode, and the actual quality and finish of the engine paint is really good. I've never seen a KTM with a dodgy looking engine. They always look brand new. This paint finish is really nice. I like the way. I wish all manufacturers would paint the entire engines. I think it just makes them last so much better without, you know, if you've got bare aluminium, it tends to corrode a little bit. New for 2021. This is, I think, the only update on the bike is this orange sticker on the wheel. I know it's a huge update for 2021, but there is now an orange sticker on the back wheel. Woohoo! Another little nice touch is the seat finish. It's not just like a plastic seat. I think it is a plastic seat, but it's got a bit of contrast to it, and it's got like a Alcantara seat. Is it Alcantara? Is that right? There's also a little bit of stitching. Oh, you know, so the seats are nice. So this is just a standard seat. There is also a heated option as well, and a comfort option on the seat. Another thing with the Superduke, you've got your toolkit under the seat, but it's actually pretty practical under the seat on these. There's a fair bit of room in here. You know, you definitely get a Happy Meal in there without any problem at all. I think they've... oh, what's that do? Oh, there's a little pull thing here. Does that release the front seat? Should we have a look? Pull the little tab, yeah, and then that's your front seat off. So there's not even a bolt hold, so you can get it with the key. You can get both the front and back seat off. There's the ECU. Anything else interesting under here? Fuse box. What is rather nice, and all KTMs have this, under the seat it tells you how to set your suspension for sport, comfort, you know, max, and how many clicks to do on the rebound and everything. It's quite a nice little touch, that. How to set your suspension, because no one knows how to play with their twiddlies, most people. It's a bit of a black art, isn't it? But you can follow KTM's instructions, and that actually works pretty well. But there we go, a little quick walk around of the Superduke. Won't spend too much time on it because, of course, you would have seen it in my last year's video, haven't you? Of course you have. Right, let's put it up the hill climb road. Everyone's favourite. It's a very nice riding position. You can hang out of the seat on this. Yeah, it would be great on track. It would be really good on track. The bars are wide, you can give it leverage. I think it would be as nice on track as the Speed RS was. It's a little bit softer, the suspension, but I think in a good way. For a road bike, in a good way. It still delivers everything you need around the twisties, but it's just a little bit more compliant. Yeah, that's good. That is really good. Really good. When you hang off of it, it's got a really nice feel to it. The tank's nice and sculpted. You can hang on to it with your knees. Yeah, that feels really nice to hang out of, actually. I'd like to get this on track. KTM, can I do a track day on it? So this is a monstrous great 1301cc V-twin. I think it's a 72 degree V-twin. You'd expect it to be a little bit vibey, and it's got a tiny amount of vibes. I'd say similar vibrations to what the Street Fighter has, actually. The Tuono's got less vibes than this. This is similar to the Street Fighter vibrations. It's fine. It's probably similar. Well, the Speed Triple's a bit more of a buzzy vibration, a bit higher frequency, but still fine. You know, none of these new bikes really suffer badly from vibration. The original Superduke was a bit vibey, and it would make your hands tingle after a while. This is so nice now. I mean, even below 3,000 revs, this is where these used to be really bad. Below 3,000 revs, it was unusable. So your usable power range was sort of between 3,000 and 9,000. That was your usable power, because below 3,000, it was, you know, you'd be like riding a jackhammer. So if we go down to 2,200-ish revs in third gear at 20, let's go 25 miles an hour, let's really push it, 25 miles an hour. There's a few more vibrations right down there, but it is still usable. That would have been blah, 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 blah on the old bike. This engine is so refined now. I mean, KTM have been making this 1290 motor. When did it first come out? 2013, something like that, 2014. It's been around for a long time. Well, it was in the RC8 originally, wasn't it? And when was the RC8 out? That was out sort of 2009, the RC8. So this engine is over 10 years old. 10 years of development, of revisions, has ended up with a power plant which is incredible. It's not even particularly thirsty, this bike. This is why KTM have dropped the fuel capacity. I think it used to be 17.5 litres this. They've dropped it down to 16 litres because they've improved the fuel efficiency again. And I'm getting around about 130 miles to a tank on this. So even from a practical perspective and fuel consumption perspective, it's knocking it out the park. Oh, dead dear. Bambi, dead. The riding position on the Superduke is very, very comfortable. It's a bit more forward than the old bike, but I don't mind that. I don't mind that at all. The seat is very wide, very comfortable seat. The leg position is pretty relaxed. You know, your feet are a little bit behind your hips, or maybe, yeah, a little bit behind your hips compared to some of the others, but it's a sporty position. It's a little bit like the Speed RS, apart from you've got a little bit more forward, I'd say, your upper body, but it's still pretty comfortable. But because the seat is so wide and nicely padded and also available as a heated, it's a really comfortable bike. I think it is way more comfortable than the Street Fighter, which I found a bit uncomfortable after a while. It's more comfortable than the Speed RS because the seat is a little bit thin at the front of the Speed. It's more comfortable than that. It's probably slightly more comfortable than the Tuono. The Tuono is also very comfortable. It's got a really wide, comfortable seat, but your feet are a little bit higher up on the Tuono because of its sports bike origin, so it's a little tiny bit more comfortable than the Tuono, but there's not much in it. How's she in the bigger twisties? Yeah, nice. Very nice, very stable. I mean, it is a little bit heavier, this bike, than some of the other Super Nakeds. This is about 190 kilos dry, so I think it's about 210 wet, so it's probably an equivalent weight to the Tuono actually, but it's not as light as the Speed RS, it's not as light as the Street Fighter. To ride, can you really tell? Perhaps it feels a tiny little bit heavier than those two, but it's a physically bigger bike than the Speed. I love the Speed, but it's a little bit small. I don't think it's any bigger than the Street Triple, and for me, being a big 18.5, 19 stone now, fatty, I think the Speed is just a little bit small perhaps. It feels comfortable enough to ride, but you just look a bit big on it. This has got a bit more to it. There's a bit more motorcycle here. So yeah, I can forgive it a few extra kilos for a bit more physical presence. So yes, you get my point. I'm loving the Superduke. Standout features for me with this bike is how easy it is to ride, and you don't feel like it's got one speed. It's perfectly happy in town. The throttle response and fueling is superb. The suspension's a really good blend of sports and comfort, so the suspension is very, very nice. The fuel economy is good. It's got all of the road toys, you know, it's got heated grips are an option, not standard, an option. It's got the cruise control, works very, very well on this, so it's got all of the practical toys. You can even have the tyre pressure monitors. It even tells you it's got a fuel gauge, which the Street Fighter doesn't have. Tuono does now. But it even tells you oil pressure. It's got everything. You do need the tech pack. The only bugbear with this bike is it's 15 grand plus another 800 quid for the tech pack. But I've seen dealers are now chucking that in with the cost of the bike. So for 15.5, you can get one of these with the tech pack, with all the toys, quick shifter blipper. The only thing you've got to add is heated grips if you want it. So it's a very practical machine. Like I say, it's got the fuel range. There's very few negatives with this bike. Very few negatives. So the question is it still the #1 naked? Oh, it's tricky. It's very, very close between this and the Tuono. I don't think you can choose between this and the 2021 Tuono. Aprilia have done a great job updating that bike. It's a much easier bike to live with, and it's really close between those two, so just take your preference really. The Tuono is more thirsty. The Tuono doesn't have quite the same range as this. You know, you'll use more fuel on the Tuono. Also, the servicing on the Aprilia, when you've got to do the valve checks, can be expensive. It's expensive to do the valve checks, which is every 12,000 miles. I think it's 18,000 miles on this for the valve check. and it'll be cheaper, you know, because of the KTM sort of dirt bike origins. They come apart really easily. It's almost like a big dirt bike, so servicing costs shouldn't be as high because of how easy they are to come apart. I mean, it's a proper naked, isn't it? The labour's not going to be as intensive stripping it down, and you've only got two cylinders you need to work on, not 4 cylinders, so it will be cheaper maintenance wise than the 200. Superduke 200, very, very close at the top for me. In third position, it's a bit of a wild card. It's probably either the Speed RS. If it wasn't for the electronics of the Speed RS, it could be fine for that top spot, but I don't think it can with the limited electronics. It's between the Speed RS and actually the dragster for me, the MV dragster. I absolutely love that bike. That bike is the winner if it's just intoxicating engagement you want. If it's just about rider engagement, the dragster is at the top of the list. The Street Fighter probably comes in 4th place. It's expensive. The quality of the Street Fighter is head and shoulders above any of the other nakeds. It is incredible quality, and I love the look of it as well, but I just found it hard work to ride, a bit overly stable. You know, the rider engagement was quite low on that bike, but yeah, it is a beautiful thing. But that's probably 4th place. The new ZH2 I'm borrowing next week, so I'll let you know how the ZH2 slots in there. But well, it should be a lot better actually, because my big criticism with the ZH2 was the suspension and brakes weren't great, and on the SE version that's been addressed. So yeah, quite looking forward to the ZH2 to see what Kawasaki have done with that for 2021. But there we are. Yeah, so the Superduke and the 200 are the daddies. For me, out of the two, I'd probably take this because it's a tiny little wee bit more practical, but they're very, very close. You can buy either of those bikes and be incredibly happy. You can buy any of those bikes and be incredibly happy. They're all fantastic machines, and that's the thing these days. All these bikes are incredible. They're all incredible, and it really is nitpicking between them. And I'm very fortunate I've got to ride all these so much and spent so much time with them. But even that, it doesn't make it any easier. It's still very, very difficult to try and pick a winner out of that lot. They're all amazing. Well, there we go, guys. Thanks for watching as always. If you're not already subscribed, please consider clicking the subscribe button. Keep the YouTube gods happy, and I'll see you on the next video, guys. Cheers. This is power level 1, which is full power. It's down, boy. I could do that all day.
What have you done here? I told you I was scared back there.
I've never dropped a bike before in my life. Oh! Backfire! That's it! That's it! Listen to this. Never mind getting beat up. Give me this any day of the week. Oh.